Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. On the agenda tonight we have Steve Marriot, and this is going to be coming from 1985, and the video that I'm going to be looking at is like half an hour long, so I'm not going to be able to do all of it. I'll just be looking at What You're Gonna Do About It, which is a Small Faces song that Steve's going to be playing through, but let's get him up on screen and see how he gets on. I'm just going to jump in here because we've got such a cool groove in this track. You can see that everyone is absolutely locked into that groove. And just a quick word about Steve's playing there on that little lead break that we had. You can see the first thing I always mention is vibrato, but Steve is doing those slides up and down, but always vibratoing, always getting the notes to sing. He's never playing them straight. So that's something to look out for on those little slides. And sliding, holding down two strings at the same time, vibrating both of those strings. So it makes it sing when he's playing that lead part. So it makes it really interesting. But then the main thing about Steve, not only great guitar playing, but that voice, just an insane vocal. I mean, we've got a three-piece setup here, and his vocal just fills in so much frequency. It's like all over that mid-range. It's just so fat. He's got a really heavy vocal that you would expect maybe, yeah, hard rock, kind of AC/DC kind of vibe to it. But exactly as AC/DC do, Steve pairs it with melody and backing vocal as well, so that you've got something that's so melodically strong and vocally strong at the same time. Gives such a unique sound and such a great sound that would just set it apart from any other band, because you can imagine the kind of music we've got going on here in terms of we've got something that's really full of groove, great melody, backing vocals, solid bass and drums, great foundation laid down here, and then Steve's vocal over the top. You can imagine a vocalist without that same quality that Steve has. The vocal might be a weak point, whereas here everything else is so strong, and somehow Steve's vocal is even better. It just sits on top of an already like amazing cake. You've got the cake and then the cherry on top, which is Steve's voice, which is absolutely fantastic. But let's get into a little bit more.
I want you to hold me tight. I want you to come when I call your name. And let me walk you home and play. What you gonna do about it? What you gonna do about it? What you gonna do about it? What you gonna do about it?
Just going to jump in here quickly just to say something about that solo that we had. Again, Steve is playing and just putting in a solo that fits the track. And he's not totally breaking away from that groove of the track within the solo. He's actually keeping it really rhythmically relevant to all the playing that's gone before. So he's not just playing single notes and just disregarding timing, which sometimes can be a good thing dependent on the composition. But for this, because there's such a great groove running through it, Steve is just chopping around, holding down a couple of strings at a time, almost playing versions of the chords within his lead playing, holding down a couple of notes. If you're playing through your pentatonic shapes, you'll know what I'm talking about, just holding down a couple of notes at a time and adding a little bit more rhythm with the right hand rather than picking out individual notes. Steve really throwing together some nice techniques here to really fill in that solo section without overdoing it, but playing exactly what is required just to get a really nice smooth solo and then back into the vocal. Just going to jump in here because we had a great angle actually of that vibrato. You could see second finger, third finger, holding down a couple of strings at a time, vibratoing both. So, you know, makes it really interesting. It's going to fill out the sound obviously rather than just having a single note. So it's a cool little thing to go to. But there, where the whole track then stops and Steve is now just with his vocal, he's got the kind of voice that you think, or you would think, hearing him sing, that he's going to burn his voice out in half a song. Some singers, they can just apply, it seems like endless grit on their voice and they never get fatigued. And that is just down to having a great technique and applying that grit in a safe way. And these guys like Steve seem to have the ability to do that, just endlessly, just apply as much force and belt it out there all night and they don't get affected. Other singers, unfortunately, they might have this kind of sound for a couple of nights on a tour, but then by the third or the fourth or the fifth night, their voice then starts to fall apart and it might start cracking and the vocal cords could be damaged because they're not singing with correct technique. They are literally like shouting every night. So if you've been on a night out, you'll know that if you've been shouting all night, the next morning you're going to sound like Barry White. Unfortunately, not in a good way. You're not going to be singing like Barry White. You're just going to have that really deep tone that actually will just really stop your whole range from, if you're singing, from getting up to those top notes. Your voice will just give out. It might even crack or break in that upper register. But let's just catch the end of the song. And there it is, and he's just about to go into All or Nothing, which is another Small Faces song. I'm going to put the link to this in the description below so you guys can watch this whole 27 minutes if you want to, because it's one of those gigs where it's so well put together and Steve is so solid a performer that you can click anywhere and it's always going to be a great part of the gig, of the performance. So Steve, great vocal, great little melody lines on the guitar as well, because a lot of singers can't pull off a lead solo, or when they do try and play a solo, they really get exposed because they haven't got the techniques down. And just a quick shout out for that bass and drums that are laying such a solid foundation for then Steve to play over the top of when he goes onto those lead sections. That foundation is always there. There's such a solid groove throughout this whole track. And I think on bass we have Jim Leviton here and Jerry Shirley on drums. I'm not sure if it is Jerry, but I'm assuming that it's Jerry Shirley from Humble Pie. But but a great rhythm section here. Just listen to the bass all the way through the track as well. Great running bass lines going all the time and so solid. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at. Keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one.